Wait for minute. But if the universe is a theater of regimes, then the history of life is not a simple story of strength. It is a story of which projections hold. This forces us to redefine the very engine of evolution, moving from a struggle for power to a struggle for structural coherence. Survival of the fittest versus survival of the stable and compatible. We have long been taught the doctrine of survival of the fittest, a narrative of competition where the strongest or most adaptable individual wins, but regime theory proposes a deeper structural truth, survival of the stable and compatible. Fitness is fleeting if a system cannot resist internal divergence or external perturbation. True survival isn't about being the best, it is about remaining within the viable regime where stability prevents collapse and compatibility preserves the system's meaning across scales. Dominance versus emergence. Dominance is an exercise of power within a state. Emergence is the birth of a new state entirely. While dominance seeks to control variables, emergence only occurs when the principle of emergent viability is met, when the product of stability and compatibility is greater than zero. Evolution is not merely a ladder of dominant species, but a sequence of emerging regimes that survived because they remained structurally coherent. The mysteries versus the emergence. We often ask the why of the universe. Why does morphogenesis stop at exactly 5 fingers? Why do quantum forces stabilize into exactly 3 generations of particles? Why does the electron possess the specific mass that it does? These are not mysteries of intent, but mysteries of the emergence functional, E equals S times C. Morphogenesis stops because the 5-finger state is the final point where stability, S, and compatibility, C, coexist. Matter is organized into 3 generations because they represent the only stable configurations allowed by the vector equilibrium of spacetime. Even the mass of an electron is a result of this balance. It has the mass it does because that specific weight allows it to remain stable and compatible with the Higgs field. We do not ask who tells the particles how heavy to be. We recognize that their mass is the structural result of the equation of balance. Existence is the answer to the requirement of coherence. What was once mythic is now measured. What was once described as cosmic balance is now written as a functional. The universe is sustained not by a single equation, but by the condition under which all equations remain meaningful. That condition is stability times compatibility. When positive, worlds appear. When broken, regimes collapse. Emergence is not mystical, it is conditional. The selfish gene versus the emergent gene. The selfish gene, the reductionist dogma. The selfish gene is a popularized view of the central dogma, which assumes that organisms are merely passive vehicles for DNA. In this model, information flows in only one direction, from the gene to the body. Evolution is viewed as a blind, bottom-up struggle for dominance, where genes compete to replicate themselves regardless of the stability of the whole organism. The emergent gene, the structural reality regime. Theory proposes the emergent gene, a unit that exists not in isolation but as part of a self-excited circuit. Unlike a selfish gene, an emergent gene is a stable unit that survives only if it remains compatible with the collective dynamics of the cell and the organism. Scientific reframing. If a gene's impact deviates too far, it creates dynamical instability, the accumulation of structural variance that pushes the system toward a regime limit. At this boundary, the mathematical conditions for existence are no longer met and the system faces inevitable collapse. The self-excited circuit, the mechanism of agency. A self-excited circuit provides the structural mechanism for agency and persistence in living systems without requiring an external master controller. The breakdown of linear causation. Traditional biology assumes genes act as a master blueprint. However, research into the human heart reveals no single oscillator gene. Instead, the heartbeat emerges from the collective coordination of cells, a muscle that excites itself to be rhythmic through a network of interactions. Decentralized intelligence. The instruction for life is everywhere and nowhere nowhere. It resides in the emergent system, not just the code. The principle of emergent viability. The ultimate reason for a self-excited circuit is the principle of emergent viability. This principle states that existence is conditional. A system persists only as long as its operating parameters remain within a specific window or regime where the product of stability and compatibility is positive, stability S. The system must possess a measurable resistance to collapse under perturbation, for example, Lyapunov exponents or entropy production rates. Compatibility C. The system must maintain basis relative coherence, ensuring that its internal dynamics remain interoperable across different scales. Regime transition. When a system crosses a boundary where S or C collapses, S to 0 or C to 0, a regime transition occurs. This provides the scientific answer to morphogenesis. The stop point for 5 fingers is simply the limit of the emergent viability of that growth regime. The agency of the whole. The emergent gene is governed by biological relativity. The genome does not act as a master blueprint. Instead, the living cell and the body as a whole control the genome. Two-way causation. Information flows both ways. The body tells the genome what to do to maintain stability. The error correction rule. The cell will not allow itself to divide until the genome is accurately replicated, proving that the intelligence of life resides in the emergent circuit. We move from the image of the gene as a master to the gene as an organ of the cell. We no longer rely on a master blueprint or mystical instruction. Instead, we recognize that reality is a sequence of stable projections. Survival is not about being the fittest competitor, but the most stable and compatible participant in the regime of life. Life persists not by intervention, but through the rigorous mathematical requirement of emergent viability. The Big Bang versus the emergent space-time. We often look back to the Big Bang and ask, what caused the ultimate beginning? Standard cosmology points to a mathematical singularity, a point of infinite density where general relativity completely breaks down. But this is not a mystery of creation. It is a crossing of regime limits. The early universe did not emerge from a mystical nothingness. As cosmological density scaled toward the extreme, the system crossed a critical threshold where stability S dropped to 0. When stability collapsed, the physical equations didn't stop existing. They simply lost their compatibility C with classical space-time boundaries. The Big Bang was not the birth of physics, but a massive regime transition, the exact moment where the cosmic film stabilized. The product of the emergence functional, E equals S times C, became positive, and a structured, interpretable universe appeared. The expansion we observe today is the ongoing evolution of a stable projection. We do not ask what happened before the Big Bang. We recognize that the cosmic singularity was merely the edge of the previous regime. The image on the screen only remains clear as long as the projector follows a precise set of constraints. When we apply this logic to reality, we find that the laws of order and balance are not just ancient metaphors. They are the fundamental parameters of a universal dynamic. God's theory, God's equation. If we define God not as a personified deity, but as the universal structural condition that sustains order, we arrive at God's equation. This is the invariant law of the universe. It asserts that worlds appear not by random chance, but only when resistance to collapse, stability, and interpretability, compatibility, align. This equation represents the divine dynamics that allow reality to remain meaningful. The karma equation. Structural karma is the dynamical consequence of boundary crossing. We can express the karma equation through the stability functional. In this framework, bad karma is the accumulation of dynamical variance that pushes a system toward a regime limit. When the balance is transgressed, the system inevitably faces collapse. Karma is not a moral judgment, it is the mathematical inevitability of a system losing its stability and falling into chaos. If emergence is what appears when the projection holds, then we must ask, what defines the boundaries of the lens? What determines whether a system thrives or fragments? The answer lies in a structural reformulation of how we understand existence itself. Regime theory is the study of conditional persistence. It teaches us that the laws of physics, biology, and society are not absolute, they are context-sensitive. Equations define what is possible, but regimes determine what lasts. A regime is a sanctuary in parameter space where law and reality coincide. Beyond its boundaries, the equations may still exist, but the world they described disappears. The theory of emergence is the final synthesis. The understanding that more is different. Complexity arises only when internal metabolic or mechanical regulation, stability, meets genetic or semantic interoperability, compatibility. From the coherence of a single neuron to the shared norms of a civilization, emergence is the prize of balance. It is not mystical, it is a measurable, universal, and conditional state of being. What was once mythic is now measured. What was once described as cosmic balance is now written as a functional. The universe is sustained not by a single equation, but by the condition under which all equations remain meaningful.